today? Give us a couple of examples.
Let me start with history and to go to religion. The first coded rule, as usual, stolen by the French, the rule, the Hammurabi's law, okay, has the following thing. If I build a structure and the structure collapses and kill the owner of the house, okay, the architect should be put to death. No, I don't want to. They didn't want to kill the architect. Think about it for a minute. Information asymmetry. Who knows more about the risk than the architect? The architect knows how to hide. No inspector, no bureaucrat, no policeman will ever be able to know more about the risk than the architect. So it is a risk management rule, okay? And from it, of course, came a series of things. The golden rule, don't do to others what you want to do to you and stuff like that. But that was 3,800 years ago that we had that rule, Hammurabi's law. And of course, the Romans implemented it. Engineers built under the bridge. And the Brazilians discovered that the helicopter was crashing too much. So they forced every helicopter repair person to take half an hour ride every Monday, the first Monday of the month. Right? First Monday of the month, you take half an hour ride, and guess what? Now they're safe, right? And when you get on a plane, make sure there's a pilot. If you see a pilot, get on the plane, right? So then it's sort of skin in the game. But now you generalize what has happened in society. There's three kind of people. The highest ranking people in history have always been those who risk their life for others. Whether the Christ, for the ideas. So they have no upside, all downside. But the upside goes to others. And then in the middle, ethically calibrated, I have skin in the game. I'm harmed by my mistake if I harm others. And then there's a class of people who get all the benefits and no harm from their mistakes. They're economists, academics, the 1% of the population, journalists, who called Thomas Friedman calls the war in Iraq. And then you look what happened to society.
How about managers?
The managers of companies are like entrepreneurs. You go join a company. The stock market had lost $2 trillion, but managers of US companies made $500 billion in compensation. Why? Because they had upside, no downside. So they benefit from the they had a free option. So there is a class of people. That class of people on the right, what I call ethically uncalibrated, okay, people represent a higher share of the managers, the people running the world today than ever we had before. And let me give you an example. You've heard of Mr. Petraeus, who was caught because he had a mistress or something. Okay, so what's the big deal, Alexander, all these guys. So I said, okay, the guy's a big warrior. He jumped probably at night in a parachute or climbed walls through grenades and stuff like that. Risked his life. He probably had shrapnel all over his body. So he's a war hero, you can allow. And someone, no, he's not. Went on Wikipedia, saw he had about 2,000 decorations, pages and pages of decoration. The person has never seen anything but a computer. The closest thing he saw to a battle, never risked his life. Comparing to only a generation ago, George Bush, the father, was a war, fell, his plane crashed in the Pacific Summer. So you realize, at no time in history have you had more people with position of power who are less harmed by their mistakes. Never. And that happens with centralization in the system, you see. So this, you have to remember that Hannibal was first in battle, all right? And the commander of the United States, George Washington, is commander-in-chief precisely. These rules were embedded in every single society, except twice, where you had the the Mandarin, in China and ancient Egypt. And there were, not coincidentally, the only two nation states in history, traditionally, before the modern nation state, where you had scribes and Alpha. Okay.
Yeah, but is this...
Yes, go ahead. No, I was going to say, I endorse that 100%, and I think it has, I just had two glosses.
We haven't disagreed at all.
Well, we'll find some. but I endorse that 100%. I just had two glosses. One is, I think what Nassim said about the ruling institutions being constructed so in a way which is quite different from the way they were as recently as the era of George Bush Sr. In other words, people who take the decisions only have upside and no downside. I think that's part of the explanation of why huge swathes of populations are now contemptuous of politicians. Not just politicians, but bankers and others. In other words, they just have a dim sense that whatever happens, these people will pay nothing, whereas they will pay something. And this leads me to the kind of second point, which is I think we should be deeply distrustful. I've been reading, let's put aside what the rights and wrongs are, but I've been reading the more elevated commentary on Cyprus, and there is a sort of emerging narrative, a meme coming out, which is saying, well, let's be clever, let's be intelligent about this. What we're going through now is a learning experience. The experience is that people who are silly enough to put money in banks should realize that that's an investment. And if an investment, you can lose all your money. So, isn't this a good move towards a greater level of economic sophistication in the general population? Well, not quite, I say, because certain explicit promises were made to small depositors, which were made actually, which come right back from the 1930s and later on. The whole basis of modern banking in most countries includes deposit insurance. So you say, well, these people who put this money in, for their everyday, they should have been clever enough to understand that's an investment in fractional reserve banking. Now they're being taught this. My answer to that is, first of all, the error that, if they made an error, for many of them, will be one which irreparably worsens their life forever. But it's very costly. But secondly, it's an error they were encouraged and even instructed to commit. Yeah. So I treat this as this kind of cleverness. I mean, I said earlier that there was assertive ethics, but as Thomas just said, in other contexts, you have cleverness masquerading. I mean, you basically have a kind of cynical ethics, not in the classical Greek sense, but in the modern sense, masquerading as cleverness, which is to say, this is actually a development which we should all be very positive about, because we all learn now from this not to trust banks.
There's one thing about Cyprus, which is modeling the situation, is that these people are making, I put my cash earning 0 interest rates, okay, and the bank is, wants to get rid of me, all right? So these guys in Cyprus are making 4, 5, 6, 7%, 8% a year, and the rest of us making 0. They don't pay the price. So you can't give people the whole thing, but now what they've done is a bunch of oligarchs are losing money, so they put the agents in the street to make sure, there's some...
well, they'll all leave. What they do now is they'll leave.
I understand. The point is that we should not, as taxpayers in the Western world, go subsidize an island that was overpaying its depositors, right? Yeah.
Maybe now here we do disagree, because we shouldn't, we shouldn't do what you say, nor should we strip the poor majority, the poor depositors.
The poor depositors, no, you should probably tell them to pay back the profits from it. This is pay back the profits.
Yeah, this is a nice point. I mean, in a simple situation, you can know whose skin it is and what game it is that we're playing. In a sophisticated situation, the specialized situation like today, where labor or value, we can separate that perfectly. That's why we can have value-added tax, because we know exactly how much value, what chain of command added. But when you go backwards and you look for guilt does not divide in a specialized society. If I murder a person and I'm supposed to get 42 years, I get 42 years. If we murder him together, it's not like each one of us gets 21. Or
10 people murder.
Or 10 people murder and each gets 4.2 years. That's not the way guilt in a sophisticated structure like today's. Guilt does not, or skin does not easily divide like that. That's why, and I'm coming to the original sort of note that I had in the beginning, there is, and I know this is philosophically and ethically very uncomfortable, but we somehow need to reopen the question of collective guilt. I mean, this is a question that has been taboo, but it is something that all the ancients, in some form of a myth, dealt with. One example is the year of Jubilee. Everybody was in debt, and you can see this perfectly in the Cyprus situation. Whose skin should we haircut on? Is it the saver?
Should everyone be skinned?
Should everybody be skinned in the same proportion? Whose skin is it? What game is it? Is this called, save money, or is it an investment? You just naming the game completely changes the skin of the individual.
By the way, if there's a benefit to anyone, it'll be to those other tax havens, which includes Britain.
Right.
To which those oligarchs move their money.
Yeah, and the old system sort of, my last sentence on this was this sort of a reset. Even your computer, freezes from time to time. And societies older than us knew that this happens. So they did a preemptive sort of a reset. And they said, well, let's forgive all debts because debt loses the individual sort of connection after some while. It becomes extremely fuzzy. Like you see today, we don't know where Greek debt ends and where German debt ends. It's not like a box of chocolate that you can split without harm to. It's like a cow. If you split a cow in the middle, it's not.
Or Greek or Cypriot.
Exactly. So the reset needs to be done. We need to know that every system freezes, even our system, even any utopian system will freeze. And we need to find systems how to defreeze it so that that is socially just. What they did in the Old Testament, and you can find it in this Hammurabi as well, forgiveness of debts every 49 years, and return of the basic property, not communism, you can keep your money, but return the property and release your debt slaves, was a socially fair, because it was an asystematic thing, but it was a systematic non-systemism. We systematically forgot about the system once in 49 years. We did a reboot. And it was socially fair because the property was running from the rich to the poor. It was also quite a nice antitrust measure, if you think of it. Today we have a similar reboot, but the force of the money went in an opposite direction.
So let me say one thing that may I share with John Gray in his idea of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, we got a nation-state notion, which is, so we have two models that have competed through history. The model of city-states, sometimes under some empire, that doesn't, do anything except with Pax Romana, prevents them from getting taxed and a military system. So, and of course we have the nation-state, that romantic nation-state, typically with racial connotations in the Germanic world and invented fictional common history in France and stuff like that. And then when you look at it, Europe is born out of that mega nation-state, not seeing the contradiction. And the strange thing about Europe is that probably a Germanic idea, and I'm going to shock people by saying that they invented this Greek origin to give aristocracy the notion. In fact, there's a lot of stuff. Babylonian origin were now Greek, right? Egyptian and Babylonian history were in the late 17th, late 18th century, early 19th century, were cut off. And then you have that thing.
So we should abolish the nation state.
No, to abolish the nation state, have the city state is a model of the future. And then when you look at these meta structures, right? First of all, the notion of Europe, okay, is a very weird notion because if you ask a Roman, there are two kinds of countries. There are countries with butter, countries with olive oil, and the cut is a poor river, The Gola, and then of course.
Well, it's about here, the Alps.
Oh, whatever, no, olive oil, you change the nature. So that was the Mediterranean is an ecosystem with a common culture associated with normal, and then you had Northern Europe and the other parts, different culture. So what I'm saying, if you want to do things right, that's what we're done. Not and someone in the ancient world would have thought that way, you see. The problem, of course, you have the Rome, Christianity, things got complicated later on. But to go back to, you will always fail when you have a big structure trying to make claims like the state of France, and always win when you let things ecologically develop to what they like to be, which is what they love, the city-states. Nation-states love war. Unification of Germany, Bismarck. The war with France, first war, second war, okay? City-states, I have an aphorism here, I can't find it in Italian, but nation-states love war, okay? City-states love commerce, families love stability, individuals love entertainment, okay? So, and this is, in the end, this is what has worked. So this is, and the model of city-states now